As our dogs become more advanced in their learning, we can start to chain together two behaviors. So instead of asking your dog for a single skill and reinforcing them, we can get 2, 3, 4, and more behaviors in a row where reinforcement happens after the last behavior. Now, it's really important before we add behaviors into a behavior chain that your dog is fluent in this behavior. This means that your dog really truly understands this behavior. And once they do, we can start to chain behaviors together so that we can get multiple behaviors in a row with only one reinforcer. There's two methods of chaining. We can chain both forwards and backwards. Today, we're going to talk about forward chaining. The behaviors are taught in a sequence in which they will be performed, and the dog is rewarded at the completion of that final step. This can cause difficulty when the reward is given at the first step if a dog gets stuck or becomes reluctant to move forward to the next step. Some dogs continue to expect to be rewarded for that first behavior without moving on. So we want to be mindful about how we're reinforcing these behaviors and how well our dog truly knows these behaviors, making sure that we're setting them up for success from the very start so that we truly can chain these behaviors together. So today we're going to work on chaining together three behaviors. We're going to work on chaining together attention, or the name game. We're then going to chain on a sit, and finally a wait, which means no forward motion. This way we can start to get some complex manners at our front door, for example, before the door opens and we go outside. The first step you're going to need to do is make sure that your dog understands these three skills in a variety of contexts. We want to make sure that your dog is easily responding 8 out of 10 times with some distractions around. Once your dog can respond to their name, sit, and wait at the level that we want for this behavior, then we can work on chaining them together. Now, since we're forward chaining these three behaviors together, we're going to start at the beginning of our chain, which is our attention grabber. We then move on to sit, and finally we move on to our wait. So we want to start chaining together behaviors 1 and 2, and then finally behaviors 1, 2, and 3. If your dog is new to chaining behaviors, you might work on separate pieces of this 3-part chain. For example, I might work on repetitions of eye contact and sit. Separately, I might work on repetitions of sit and wait before I end up chaining all three of these behaviors together. Now, when we're working on chaining behaviors, you're really used to watch me, click, and treat. We click the moment our dog does the behavior that we want, and we follow it up with a treat. When we are working on forward chaining, in lieu of a click or a verbal marker yes, you add in your cue for the next behavior. So it might be watch me, sit, click, treat. This way your dog is hearing that cue for the next behavior immediately after they do the first behavior correctly. And then they hear that clicker letting them know that they've done the right thing at the end of your chain. Once your dog gets comfortable with a few repetitions of your 2-part chain, watch me, sit, click, treat, then we want to add in our third piece of wait. So your chain now becomes watch me, sit, wait, click, treat. Now we have all three of these behaviors being performed in a row or a chain with that reinforcement happening at the end. Now, the fun thing about chaining is that you can pick any behaviors that your dog is fluent with, and you can certainly go beyond just a 3-part chain, and how you can start piecing together some small behavior chains in some low distraction environments to get started. Maybe some door manners or some manners around food, maybe even some routines involving getting your leash on and getting out the door. By practicing more behavior chains, they'll get easier and easier for your dog, which gives you more opportunities to get more chains, aka more behavior from your dog before you give that reinforcer. Now, when we're working with our dogs, we certainly want to set them up for success, but things don't always go perfectly when we're working with living and breathing animals, especially if this is a concept that you as a trainer are new to. So let's talk about some of those common challenges that you might see or run into as you're starting your chains. The first common mistake that I see is that the behavior that we're trying to add into the chain is not as fluent as you might have thought. Oftentimes we hear from owners, oh, my dog knows what he's supposed to be doing. But if your dog is not responding to your cue, There's some confusion there. There's a reason your dog can't do this behavior, and it's not just because they're being stubborn, right? Our dogs are having trouble. They probably don't know this word in this context like we thought they did. So if at any point you're doing a warm-up with your dog or starting to add a behavior into a chain and your dog can't respond to the cue, I recommend stopping your chaining and just going up to freshen and fine-tune that single behavior. That way, when you go back to adding it into the chain, your dog knows exactly what you're looking for. Another common challenge is that people get excited about behavior chains, and we might try to add too many behaviors into a chain before our dog is ready for them. I recommend getting really comfortable with 2- and 3-part behavior chains before moving on to anything more advanced. The third common thing that I see as owners are starting their behavior chains is that the dog doesn't respond quite as quickly as we thought they would. For example, if I say the word sit, there's a little bit of time before that dog responds and eventually puts their bum to the ground. This is called latency. When we're working on a behavior, we want to make sure that that behavior looks exactly like we want it to before we add it into the chain. So if there's a little bit of latency between when you give your cue and when your dog responds, these are things that we want to fine-tune outside of this behavior chain. Work on increasing how quickly your dog responds to that behavior, or work on speed, how quickly your dog is able to perform that behavior before adding that behavior back in to your behavior chain. Chains are a lot of fun, but they can be more advanced. So don't be afraid to take your time really building a strong foundation of these behaviors that you want before adding them into a behavior chain. If you have taught your dog a behavior chain that you use in your day-to-day life to make things a little easier in your routine, we'd love to hear about it. Drop your behavior chains in the comments below. And if you're looking for some more advanced skills for you and your dog to work on, check out this playlist here, which has some fun things that might keep you and your dog entertained. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to hit subscribe, and happy training.